Picture this. The sky has turned to bruised purple and violent gray, a mirror of the terror that grips your heart. Rain doesn't fall. It attacks, driven by a wind that screams through the pines like a vengeful spirit. Every ragged breath you take is a gasp of fire in your lungs. You are running, not from the storm, but from a man whose name is a brand of ownership seared onto your future. A man who believes your life is a piece of property he has already purchased. Your feet, raw and bleeding inside your worn-out boots, slip on the muddy earth, and you fall again. Below you, the lights of the town you fled twinkle with false warmth, a cage of gold and glass. Above you, only the unforgiving peaks of the mountain wilderness. And then you see it, a flicker of light, impossibly small and frail against the tempest's fury. A cabin, a single, solitary light in a world gone dark. Could be a trap, a den of thieves, or worse. But the alternative is the storm, and the man who sent his hounds to drag you back. You are faced with a terrible choice. The monster you know, or the complete and terrifying unknown. Do you knock on that door, placing your fate in the hands of a stranger? Or do you surrender to the wilderness and the men who hunt you within it? This is the choice that faced Alara, and her decision would change not one life, but two, forever. Alara's knuckles, white and trembling, hovered before the rough-hewn wood of the door. The cabin was small, more of a sturdy shack, built with the kind of stubbornness that only comes from a man determined to be left alone. Smoke curled bravely from its stone chimney, a defiant signal against the storm's siege. She could hear the hounds baying in the distance, their cries swallowed and spat back by the wind. It was now or never. She knocked. The sound was swallowed by a clap of thunder that seemed to split the very heavens. She knocked again, harder, using the last of her strength. The door creaked open a few inches. A man stood silhouetted in the warm lamplight from within. He was old, his face a roadmap of hardship and time, dominated by a formidable scar that ran from his left temple down to the corner of his mouth, pulling it into a permanent, grim line. But it was his eyes that held her. They were a pale, clouded blue, like a winter sky obscured by fog. They stared forward, through her, seeing nothing. He was blind. "Who's out there?" His voice was gravel, deep and steady, a rock against the howling gale. "Speak up, or be on your way." Alara's own voice was a broken whisper. "Please, sir. I'm lost." The storm. The man was silent for a long moment, his head cocked as if listening not to her words, but to the truth behind them. He was listening for the sound of fear, of desperation, and of the pursuit she hadn't mentioned. "One night," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "You can shelter from the storm. When morning comes, you leave." He stepped back, a silent invitation into the small, warm space. Inside, the cabin was sparse but immaculate. A fire crackled in the hearth. A small cot was neatly made in the corner, and the air smelled of pine wood, old books, and solitude. The man moved with a slow, deliberate grace, his hands brushing against the walls and furniture, navigating his world of darkness with an unnerving precision. He introduced himself only as Silas. For 8 years, he had lived here alone, a soldier who had returned from a war that took his sight and, as she would learn, so much more. He had retreated from a world he could no longer see, finding a strange peace in the quiet rhythms of the mountain. He asked no questions about the bruises on her arms or the terror that still clung to her like a shroud. He simply handed her a dry blanket and a tin cup of hot, bitter coffee, an unspoken armistice offered against the world outside. The storm raged for 3 days, trapping them together in the tiny cabin, a world unto themselves. The slow burn of trust began not with words, but with actions. Alara, seeing the worn patch on his sleeve, mended it with a needle and thread from her small satchel. Her stitches were neat and small, an act of quiet gratitude. Silas, in turn, showed her how to properly bank the fire so it would burn through the night, a lesson in survival. In the long hours, a fragile peace settled between them. The silence was no longer heavy with suspicion, but companionable. To fill it, Alara discovered a small stack of books by his cot, their spines softened with use. "May I?" she asked, her voice soft. Silas nodded, his sightless eyes turned toward the fire. And so she began to read to him. She read tales of distant seas and forgotten kings, her voice weaving worlds of color and light into his perpetual darkness. He would sit perfectly still, his scarred face unreadable, but she could feel him listening with his entire being. Through the stories, their own began to unfold. "Mayor Thornton," she finally confessed one evening, the name tasting like poison on her tongue. "My father promised me to him, to settle a debt. The mayor, he looks at me like I'm a prize sow he's won at the fair. He said the law was on his side, that a daughter was a father's property to give Silas's hands, which had been carving a piece of wood, stilled." The knife paused. "Some men believe the law is a club to beat others into submission," he said, his voice low and rumbling. "They mistake power for honor." It was then he told her of his own past. He spoke of the war, not of battles, but of the fire. A raid on his village while he was away on patrol. He returned to smoke and ruin, his eyes burned by the very flames that had consumed his home, his wife, his son. "I survived," he said, the words hollowed out by a grief so old it had become a part of him. "But my world ended that day. I came here because the silence of these mountains is the only thing that can drown out the noise of what I lost in that moment." Elara no longer saw a blind old soldier. She saw a man who had built a fortress around a broken heart. And he no longer saw a frightened girl, but a spirit as resilient as the mountain pines outside his door. The cabin ceased to be a temporary shelter. It became a sanctuary. He taught her the language of the forest, the snap of a twig that meant deer, the call of a hawk that meant clear skies. She, in turn, brought a gentle order to his life, her presence a quiet light in his long night. They were two broken souls, slowly, carefully, mending each other. A found family was being forged in the heart of the wilderness, a bond stronger than law, deeper than blood. The fragile peace was shattered on a crisp autumn morning, a month after the storm. The air was cold and clear, the sky a brilliant, cloudless blue. Elara was outside, gathering firewood, when she heard it. Not the familiar baying of hunting dogs, but the confident, cruel laughter of men. Her blood ran cold. She scrambled back toward the cabin, her heart hammering against her ribs. Through the trees she saw them. 3 men, led by a figure whose bulk and expensive coat were unmistakable even from a distance.
Mayor Thornton.
He stood there, a sneer twisting his lips, looking at the small cabin as if it were an insect he was about to crush. "Elara, my dear," his voice boomed, slick with false charm. "This game of hide-and-seek is over. Your father is worried sick. Come now, be a good girl and come home." Silas emerged from the cabin, his old service rifle held loosely, but ready in his hands. He stood in front of the door, positioning himself between Elara and the men, a blind, unmovable guardian. Thornton chuckled, a nasty, condescending sound. "And who is this? Your new guardian?" An old, blind relic playing soldier, he took a step forward, waving a piece of paper. "I have a writ signed by the judge. It states that you are my legal ward, promised to me by your father. You will come with me, or this man will be arrested for kidnapping Elara's spirit, which had grown so strong in the safety of the cabin." Faltered. The law, the weapon he always used, was pointed at them again. But then Silas spoke, his voice calm and lethal. "That paper means nothing on this mountain, Mayor. This is my land, and this woman is under my protection. You are trespassing." Thornton's face purpled with rage. "You dare defy me? You broken old man. Seize him," he snarled at his men. But the men hesitated. There was something in Silas's stance, in the quiet, absolute certainty of his voice, that gave them pause. He was blind, yet he seemed more aware of his surroundings than any of them. He knew the exact distance to the woodpile, the slope of the land, the position of every tree. This was his kingdom. "I fought men far worse than you," Silas said, his voice dropping lower. "Men who fought for something more than greed. You are nothing but a bully in a fine coat. Now get off my land before you learn what a broken old man can do. The standoff was electric with tension. It was Alara who broke it. Stepping out from behind Silas, she found a voice she didn't know she possessed. It was clear, steady, and sharp as forged steel. "I am not property, Mayor Thornton," she declared, her eyes locking onto his. "I am not a debt to be paid. I will not go with you. Not now, not ever. If you try to force me, I will fight you. And if you harm him," she gestured to Silas, "I will make sure every soul in this territory knows you for the coward and the tyrant you truly are." Thornton was stunned into silence. He had come expecting a terrified girl, not this defiant woman who stood before him. He saw the fire in her eyes, the unyielding strength of the man beside her, and for the first time he felt a flicker of fear. He had miscalculated. He knew a protracted fight, an accusation from a woman now so bold, could unravel the web of corruption he had so carefully woven. With a final, venomous glare, he turned on his heel. "This isn't over," he spat, before leading his men back into the woods. Their retreat a stark admission of defeat. The immediate threat was gone. As the sound of their horses faded, Alara looked at Silas, her heart swelling with a profound emotion. He stood as he always did, a steadfast rock. She placed her hand on his arm. He turned his sightless eyes toward her, and for the first time, she saw the ghost of a smile touch the corner of his scarred mouth. They had faced the storm from her past, and they had won. In the quiet aftermath, the cabin felt larger, the air lighter. The shadow of Mayor Thornton had been banished not by force of arms, but by the strength of their unified spirits. The law he had wielded as a weapon had proven powerless against the unwritten laws of honor, courage, and sanctuary. Alara and Silas were no longer just a refugee and her protector. They were a family, born not of blood, but of shared adversity and mutual respect. The seasons turned. Alara's knowledge of the wilderness grew, her hands becoming as capable as her spirit was strong. Silas's world, once confined to memory and darkness, was filled again with the sound of her voice reading stories, the warmth of her presence, and the shared purpose of a life rebuilt together. The old soldier, who had lived alone for 8 years believing his life was over, had found a new reason to live. The frightened girl, who had fled a life of servitude, had found the freedom to become the woman she was always meant to be. Their story is a powerful reminder, isn't it? It asks us to look past the surface, to see the strength that lies hidden in what the world might call broken. How many times do we judge a book by its cover, a person by their scars, or a life by its limitations? Silas was blind, yet he saw Alara's true character more clearly than anyone. Alara was a fugitive, yet she possessed an integrity more binding than any legal document. Their story begs the question, what does it truly mean to see? Is it merely a function of our eyes, or is it the ability of our hearts to recognize the light in another soul, even in the deepest darkness? Family, they teach us, is not always the one we are born into. Sometimes it is the one we build. A fortress of trust, a sanctuary of shared hope. It is the person who stands with you when the storm comes, who faces your demons alongside you, and who reminds you that you are not alone. If this story of a blind soldier and the brave woman who found shelter in his home, and his heart, has moved you, please let us know in the comments below. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that even after the most violent storm, a new and beautiful life can begin to grow. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories that celebrate the unshakable power of the human spirit.